It's funny, isn't it? The way life can just sort of stall. That's where I was, plain and simple. My name is Carol, by the way, and if you'd asked me 6 months ago what my days looked like, I'd have probably sighed and said, predictable, not bad. Mind you, just quiet, too quiet, maybe. The kids are grown and flown, bless their hearts. And Richard, well, it's been 5 years now since he passed. The house, our lovely little house with the big garden, suddenly felt enormous, and the garden itself, oh, the garden was the worst. It used to be our shared joy, Richard's and mine. We'd spend hours out there, him with his vegetables, me with my roses and wildflowers. After he was gone, I tried, I really did, but the weeds seemed to have more fight in them than I did. It got to a point where looking out the kitchen window at the tangled mess just made my chest ache. It was a constant reminder of what I'd lost. And if I'm being honest, a reflection of how I felt inside, overgrown with a sort of quiet despair. That's where young Ethan comes into the story. He's Sharon and Bill's boy from across the street. I've known him since he was a tyke, all knees and elbows, chasing fireflies in their yard. He'd gone off to college, engineering or something smart like that, and I hadn't seen him much in the last few years, just glimpses when he was home for holidays. This year, though, he was back for the whole summer, working some remote internship and helping his folks out. So there I was one Saturday morning in late May, staring at a particularly stubborn patch of thistle that seemed to be actively mocking me. The sun was already beating down, and I swear I'd pulled that same thistle out about 5 times already this season. I was hot, frustrated, and probably looked a sight, with dirt smudged on my cheek and my hair escaping its ponytail. I heard a voice, a polite, "Morning, Mrs. Henderson." I straightened up, a little too quickly for my back's liking, and saw Ethan leaning against his parents' fence, a coffee mug in his hand. He had that same kind, open face he'd always had, though it was a man's face now, not a boy's. He'd shot up lean and taller than his dad, with a quiet sort of strength about him. "Oh, Ethan, good morning, dear," I said, trying to sound cheerier than I felt. "Home for a bit?" "Yeah, for the summer," he smiled. "Just, uh, enjoying the quiet before my folks wake up properly and put me to work." He gestured vaguely with his mug. Then his eyes drifted to my garden, and I saw that little flicker of, well, I don't know what it was. Pity, maybe? Concern? He was too polite to say anything directly. Of course. We chatted for a few minutes, the usual neighborly things. Then, as he was about to head back inside, he hesitated. "Mrs. Henderson," he said, a little awkwardly, "I've got a fair bit of free time in the afternoons. If you ever, um, needed an extra pair of hands in the garden, I mean, I used to help my grandpa with his a lot. I actually kind of miss it." I was taken aback. Really? In this day and age, a young man offering to help an old neighbor with her weeds? It felt like something out of a bygone era. My first instinct was to say, "Oh no, dear, I'm managing," which was a bald-faced lie. The truth was, the thought of someone else seeing the full extent of the disaster up close was a bit mortifying. But then I looked at his earnest face, and I looked at that damn thistle, and a different thought popped into my head. Why not? What did I have to lose other than a few square feet of horticultural humiliation? "Ethan," I said slowly, that's incredibly kind of you. "Are you sure? I wouldn't want to impose." He gave a small shrug, a genuine smile lighting up his face. "Not imposing at all. I'd like to, seriously, gets me out of the house, away from the computer screen." And so it was settled. He said he'd come over after lunch, around 2. I spent the next couple of hours in a bit of a daze, half pleased, half anxious. I even tidied up the potting shed a bit, though heaven knows why. It wasn't like we were hosting a garden party. When 2 o'clock rolled around, I heard a gentle knock on the back gate. There he was, dressed in an old t shirt and jeans, work gloves already on. He looked ready. "All right, Mrs. Henderson," he said, his voice practical but gentle. "Where do we start?" I took a deep breath. "Well, Ethan," I said, gesturing to the chaos, "take your pick. It's all pretty bad." He didn't flinch. He just nodded, his gaze sweeping over the yard with a thoughtful expression. "How about we tackle that big patch of, well, everything over by the old oak tree? Clear that out, and it might feel like a win." He was right, of course. That area had been a lost cause for years. It was ambitious, but his confidence was surprisingly infectious. We found a rusty old wheelbarrow, and I dug out my spare trowels and a sturdy garden fork I hadn't used since Richard. Well, since before. For the first hour or so, we worked mostly in silence, punctuated by the scrape of tools and the occasional grunt of effort. It was hot, no denying it, and the work was tougher than I remembered. But there was something different about it this time. I wasn't alone. Every time I paused to wipe my brow, I'd see Ethan steadily working, methodically clearing patch after patch. He didn't complain, didn't even seem to mind the sweat dripping down his face. He'd ask occasionally, "Is this a weed or something you want to keep, Mrs. Henderson?" And I'd do my best to remember what was what. So much of it was just a blur. After a while, a rhythm established itself between us. He'd tackle the really tough, rooted stuff, and I'd follow behind, pulling the smaller weeds and gathering the debris. Slowly, painstakingly, a patch of bare earth began to emerge from beneath the jungle. It was like watching a buried treasure being unearthed. I found myself actually enjoying it. The ache in my back was still there, but it was a good ache, an ache of effort, not despair. And the silence, it wasn't the empty silence I was used to. It was a companionable silence, filled with the shared purpose of our work. I glanced over at Ethan, his dark hair plastered to his forehead with sweat, his t-shirt damp. He was focused, determined, and there was a quiet decency about him that warmed me through and through. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, a little sliver of hope, of actual, honest to goodness positive feeling began to sprout in the neglected garden of my own heart. The afternoons with Ethan became a fixture. He'd show up around 2, regular as clockwork, after his remote internship hours were done. We didn't always talk a lot, not at first anyway. Sometimes the comfortable quiet was enough. The snip of shears, the rustle of leaves, the thud of pulled weeds hitting the compost pile. But gradually, as the garden began to breathe again, so did our conversations. It started small. He'd ask about a particular plant, maybe one of Richard's old roses I was trying to save. I'd tell him its name. When we planted it, a little memory attached. He was a good listener. Ethan, he wouldn't interrupt, just nod, his brow furrowed in concentration as he carefully pruned a dead branch or loosened the soil around a struggling perennial. He started telling me things too, about his engineering projects, the complexities of which went right over my head, but his enthusiasm was infectious. He talked about his grandpa's farm, the summers he spent there as a kid, learning to drive a tractor and mend fences. That's where his quiet competence came from, I suppose. He wasn't just being nice, helping the old lady next door. He genuinely seemed to find a satisfaction in the physical work, in bringing order from chaos. He told me once, while we were wrestling with a particularly stubborn root. It's like solving a puzzle. You know, this garden, figuring out what needs to go, what needs to stay, how to make it all work together. I'd never thought of it that way, but he was right. The transformation of the garden was nothing short of miraculous. Areas I'd written off as lost causes began to show signs of life. With the choking weeds gone, forgotten little flowers started peeking through, shyly at first, then with more confidence. Ethan had a knack for seeing the potential in things. He'd point to a straggly looking bush and say, I think if we give this a good feed and cut it back here, it'll come back strong. And usually he was right. My old rose bushes, which I thought were past their prime, started putting out new, healthy growth after he meticulously cleared away the brambles that were strangling them and worked some of Richard's old fish emulsion into the soil. The scent of roses, a scent I hadn't truly registered in years, began to drift through the summer air again. It was like a balm to my soul. One afternoon, we were taking a break, sitting on the old wooden bench Richard had built, sipping lemonade I'd made. The sun was warm on our faces, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the newly liberated oak tree. You know, Mrs. Henderson, Ethan said, looking out over our handiwork, this garden has really good bones. Richard always said that. I replied, a soft smile playing on my lips. It was easier to talk about Richard with Ethan there. He didn't offer platitudes or awkward condolences. He just listened, accepted. He designed it all, you know, every path, every bed. He had a good eye. Ethan said, it feels peaceful here, even when it was wild. You could feel it. That comment touched me more than he knew. He saw it. He understood. It wasn't just about pulling weeds. It was about uncovering something precious that had been lost. As the weeks went by, our conversations deepened. He'd talk about his future, the uncertainties of it, the pressures he felt. I found myself sharing things too, about my own life, my dreams when I was his age, the joys and sorrows of raising a family, the quiet ache of widowhood. It was never heavy, though. There was a lightness to our talks, an easy give and take. He had a way of asking questions, gentle and curious, that made me want to open up. And in talking to him, in sharing those parts of myself, I felt a part of me waking up. There was a subtle shift happening within me, so gradual I almost didn't notice it at first. The house didn't feel quite so empty anymore. I started looking forward to the afternoons, to the easy companionship, the shared laughter when one of us would nearly trip over a misplaced tool, or when a particularly stubborn weed finally gave way with a satisfying pop. I even started baking again, cookies, mostly things that were easy to share out on the porch during our lemonade breaks. Seeing Ethan's genuine appreciation, the way his eyes would light up, it brought back a simple joy I'd forgotten. The tension I used to carry in my shoulders, a constant, weary ache, began to ease. I was sleeping better. I was smiling more. My daughter, Sarah, called one evening and said, Mom, you sound different, happier. And I realized she was right. This young man, with his quiet kindness and his strong hands, hadn't just helped me reclaim my garden. He was, in his own unassuming way, helping me reclaim a piece of myself. The you won't believe what happened wasn't some dramatic event. It was this quiet, steady blossoming of connection, and, dare I say it, joy. The climax of the summer, or at least what felt like it in the garden, arrived with the peak blooming of Richard's prize climbing rose, the new dawn he'd babied for years. It had been a sad, leggy thing, barely clinging to the trellis when Ethan and I first surveyed the scene. We pruned it hard, fed it, and retrained its thorny canes with patient care. Now, it was a cascade of pale pink, fragrant blossoms tumbling over the old wooden structure with an almost defiant exuberance. It was breathtaking. Ethan and I stood before it one late afternoon, the sun beginning to dip, casting a golden glow over everything. The air was thick with the sweet, spicy scent of the roses. Wow, Ethan said, his voice quiet with something like awe. We actually did that. Asterisk, you asterisk, did that. Mostly, Ethan, I corrected gently. You had the vision for it. He shook his head. No, it was a team effort, Mrs. Henderson. You remembered where it needed the most help, what it liked. He looked at me, then, a genuine, warm smile on his face. It's beautiful. Your husband would be proud. Tears pricked my eyes. And for once, they weren't tears of sorrow, but of a deep, resonant gratitude. Yes, I, I managed, my voice a little thick. Yes, he would. In that moment, standing there with the scent of roses all around us, a profound sense of peace settled over me. It wasn't just about the rose or even the reclaimed garden. It was about connection. This young man, who had started as just the neighbor's son, had become a friend, a confidant, a partner in this small, significant restoration. He had brought light and energy not just to my neglected yard, but to my somewhat neglected life. The work was far from over. Gardens are never truly finished, are they? But something fundamental had shifted. The despair that had clouded my days had lifted, replaced by a quiet hum of contentment and a renewed appreciation for the simple beauty of growth, both in the earth and in the human heart. It was a gift, this unexpected friendship, more precious than any flower in the garden. As August began to wane, so too did the long summer days. There was a different quality to the light, a softer gold, and the evenings carried the first subtle hint of autumn's approach. Ethan's internship was winding down, and the talk of him returning to college, which had seemed so distant back in May, now felt very near. A quiet melancholy began to weave itself into our afternoon gardening sessions. We didn't speak of it directly, not for a while, but it was there, an unspoken awareness that this particular season was drawing to a close. The garden, though, was a triumph. It was vibrant, alive, a testament to months of shared effort. The vegetable patch, which Ethan had enthusiastically resurrected, was overflowing with tomatoes, zucchini, and peppers. My flower beds were a riot of color, zinnias, marigolds, and the late summer asters just beginning to show their purple hues. The roses, especially Richard's New Dawn, had put on a second, equally glorious flush of blooms. Walking through it now, I no longer felt that pang of loss, that heavy reminder of Richard's absence. Instead, I felt his presence in a different way, in the beauty he had created, a beauty that Ethan and I had helped to uncover and nurture. One afternoon, as we were deadheading some petunias, Ethan finally said it. Well, my classes start in 2 weeks. I'll probably head back to campus about a week before that, get settled in. I nodded, trying to keep my expression neutral, though a little pang went through me. Of course, dear. You must be excited to get back, see your friends. Yeah, I am, he said, but there was a thoughtful, almost wistful look in his eyes as he gazed around the garden. But I'm going to miss this. A lot. I'm going to miss you too, Ethan, I said, and the sincerity in my voice surprised even myself. This garden, well, it wouldn't look like this without you, and I dare say I wouldn't feel like this without you either. He looked a little embarrassed then, but pleased. It was my pleasure, Mrs. Henderson. Seriously, I learned a lot. Oh, I think I'm the one who learned more. I chuckled, and it was true. He'd taught me about new composting techniques, about companion planting, practical things. But more than that, he'd reminded me about the joy of shared purpose, the comfort of easy companionship, and the surprising ways life can offer renewal when you least expect it. He'd shown me that kindness and connection can bloom in the most unexpected places, just like a forgotten flower pushing its way through compacted earth. The day before he was due to leave, he came over one last time. Not to work, but just to say goodbye properly. I baked a peach pie, using some of the fruit from the little tree in the corner of the yard that we'd managed to save. We sat on the porch, the late afternoon sun filtering through the leaves, the garden humming with the sound of bees. "Thank you again, Mrs. Henderson," he said after his second slice of pie, "for everything, for letting me help." "Oh, Ethan," I said, reaching out and patting his hand. "The thanks are all mine. You brought my garden back to life. And in a way, you brought me back to life too." It felt a little bold to say it so plainly, but it was the truth. The unbelievable part of it all wasn't some grand dramatic event. It was this: a quiet, unassuming young man had reached out across the generational divide, offering help with no expectation of anything in return, and in doing so had forged a connection that had mended something deep inside me. He'd helped me find joy in the soil again, find peace in the